The Rolling Plains chapter of Texas Master Naturalists presents Common Grasses of North Texas with Alex Nelson.
Hi, I'm Alex, and we're out here at Lake Arrowhead State Park, and we're going to go on a little walk and talk about some grasses that we see. Common things to identify, warm season grasses. Let's have a good time. Alright, so here, all of this tall grass around me, it's kind of been blown over by the storm, but this is one you probably know. This is commonly called Johnson grass or Sorghum halpens. It's a tall grass that can get up to 7 feet tall, and it spreads from rhizomes or like long roots that go under the ground. One of the most common or telltale signs that you're looking at Johnson grass is this white vein on the midrib of the leaf. See how it's got that pale color right on the midrib? That's a pretty key sign that you're looking at Johnson grass, along with the height and the way that the inflorescence or the flower of this plant is open, and these almost spread close to right angles. These branches off of the main spike. This plant is not native to our area. A lot of people don't like it because it's sort of like a weed, but this plant was brought in from the Mediterranean in the 1800s and has since come to colonize roadsides, wild areas, pastures, and sort of become a nuisance. There's an area underneath the sheath of the leaf where it meets the stem called the ligule. And you can see here it's a fringe of hairs. Can you see all those hairs? That's another sign that you're looking at Johnson grass. So here we've got a plant called Tridens albescens, or white tridens. This plant starts blooming earlier in the summer, but right now it's pretty well matured. So we see that the inflorescence, or the flowers, the spikelets, are white. In this earlier summer, they'll be like a pale purple to white. And sometimes they'll even have striations on each little spikelet. And again, the spikelets are these tiny little, like there's one spikelet for you. So those will have little purple and white striations. And if you'll notice, the rachis, or the stalk that the spikes or the spikelets are on, is a little bit wavy here. You'll see it's got a wavy rachis. Another thing that's distinguishable about this plant is these bluish green waxy leaves down here. So you'll see they've almost got like a waxy covering on them, and they're glabrous, which means that they don't have any hairs. And sometimes when you break the leaf and smell it, it'll have a foul odor. This one doesn't seem to be smelly though, so you can't always use that to identify it. The nodes of tridens can also be swollen. So here we've got the node of the culm, and it's got a little bump on it. It's a little rough there. That's another way to tell if you're looking at tridens or not. And so here we have a grass that some of you may recognize. This is a really popular grass, commonly known as little bluestem or Schizacharium scoparium. You'll notice that last year's growth you can kind of see is a little bit reddish in color. When the light hits it, you see it's got a reddish hue. Whereas this year's growth, this is the blue-green. This is a really distinctive bluish color in the leaves and in the stems of this plant. Sometimes the leaves, and in this one you can see it, they've got a strong keel. And that helps differentiate it from similar looking tall bunch grasses that are native to our area. And another thing to note is what's called a ligule. And if you can zoom in real close, I don't know if you can see it. We've got a really tiny, minute ligule of membrane. So the ligule is just the part of the grass where the leaf meets the stem. And there will be a little collar in there. And in this grass, it's really minute. And in other grasses that might easily be mistaken for a ligule, it's not as minute. See, right here, you've got a tiny little fringe of membrane. Other grasses, like switchgrass, that might be easily mistaken for this grass, have a different ligule. So that's one of the things that you can use, along with this bluish color and last year's old growth. to help identify little blue stem. Okay, so here we've got a very tall grass, and at first glance, because of these bluish leaves, you might think, oh, maybe this is little blue stem because of these bluish green leaves. But if you look a little bit closer, you'll notice that these leaves are quite a bit broader than what you would find in little blue stem. And at maturity, they tend to bend, whereas little blue stem usually falls a little bit more erect with the leaves. These leaves don't have any hairs. They might feel a little bit scabrous to the touch. And then the big difference is this open panicle right here about head height. This grass can get, up to 6 or 7 feet tall. And then it's got this spreading panicle that's really airy. So normally, more often you'll see grasses that have a compact head, but this has a really spreading panicle, which just means that these branches spread out quite a ways, and then they've got these spikelets that are borne on these kind of compound branches that come off of these little projections off of the main stem. So this is switchgrass, or Panicum virgatum. So here we've got another common grass that you'll find out in any North Texas area. This is diminutive, relatively, only to about 2.5 feet tall. This is a hairy grama, or Bouteloua hirsuta. Now it's called hairy because on this inflorescence, you'll see, if you can zoom in really, really closely, you'll see that it's got lots of tiny little hairs right here on the spikelets. This is hairy grama. The leaves are sort of diminutive, bluish in color. What is helpful in distinguishing this from similar looking grammas, say like blue grama, is that it's got a bristle. So the rachis that these spikelets are on, the stem of the spikelets, extends beyond where the spikelets go. So this little terminal point here is a bristle. And bristles occur in hairy grama, but not in blue grama. So here we've got a grass. This is a low grass. It only grows to about 1.5 feet tall. It normally blooms in the spring, but if the conditions are right, if it's shady and moist enough, it'll bloom again in the fall, and we've been having a pretty wet season. And here you can see, this is called dicanthelium. This is Schreiber's dicanthelium. And the inflorescence on this grass, or the flower, is an open panicle. So you see here we've got spikelets occurring in this panicle, but they're really far apart and they're very irregular, unlike something like Johnson grass or tridens, where they're really, really regular. And another thing that's notable about this, as you can tell, is that the leaves are very broad and short, and they're very close together, almost like a fan shape, and they're very irregular. This is a very unusual grass for our area, and so it's pretty easy to distinguish.
And then there's a whole group of it.
Yeah, so here's a better, for the dicanthelium, here's a better inflorescence, a better panicle. You can see the really irregular pattern. You've got multiple stems, multiple pedicels emanating from the base, and kind of an irregular fashion. And then you've also got some branching up here at the top. So a really neat little grass, and a good forage grass. Now here we've got a good bunch of the state grass of Texas. This is side oats grama, or Bouteloua curtipendula. This is a really great grass. It's usually to about 3 feet tall. It's a bunch grass. And this one is just past flower. So these seeds are starting to mature, these spikelets. What's distinguishable, the most notable feature, is that the spikelets of this grass usually come to one side, and they kind of are pendulous on this wavy rachis. So you'll see here that the stem that is on these grasses has a wave to it. And then the spikelets are on a short pedicel that hangs from it, giving this grass sort of a dangling appearance. The inflorescence and the stalk, the culm, is a lot taller than the leaves. These leaves are usually curled and they have a bluish color. The ligule of this grass is a fringe of hairs, if I can find one. So do you see the hairs on that fringe? That's the ligule of this grass. A fringe of hairs there. It's kind of minute, but if you get a hand lens, you can see it pretty well. And again, a lot of times these leaves will have sort of a scabrous feeling, which means that they've just got a lot of tiny hairs that when you rub them against the grain, against the veination, you'll feel sort of like a sandpapery feeling. That's a scabrous leaf. So this is Bouteloua curtipus' grass. Well, here we've got another grass that you'll probably see pretty commonly this time of year in August. This is commonly known as King Ranch bluestem, or Bothriochloa ischamum. You'll notice the inflorescence has a lot of these long digits, each with a lot of spikelets. They're kind of close to the panicle, but they're not really fuzzy. You can see that they're these just kind of straight little inflorescences. They don't spread, they don't open, but they all come from not a single point, but points along the main rachis. Another thing about this plant that helps you distinguish it from similar looking grasses is that at the node of the culms, so down here on the stem, underneath the flower, you'll have a bend. And so a lot of times these will kind of fall along the ground and then bend upwards at these nodes. So you'll notice how that node isn't perfectly straight, it's kind of bending upward, and this kind of gives it a sleepy habit. Another thing is the hairs on the sheath of these leaves are silky. I don't know if you can see them on your camera, but they have these long silky hairs. A lot of times what's helpful when looking at grasses is to have a hand lens. This is not a native grass. This came from China in, I think, the early 1900s, and it was introduced as a forage grass. But now it's kind of invading everywhere. It's taking over. King Ranch bluestem is sort of notorious amongst people who manage land because it is really invasive and it'll outcompete native grasses in a lot of areas. Another thing about this grass is that the ligule is a tiny membrane, and there will be hairs, silky hairs around the collar and around the ligule, if you can see that. See silky hairs and a membrane. It has a close relative that's common in the area, but the hairs won't be as silky on that one. So that's another way to distinguish it from other plants in the area. Here in the turf, this gets mowed over a lot, but it's still flowering. This is Chloris verticillata, or tumble windmill grass. Here's a large flower of one. You can see they're pretty distinctive in their spreading habit. There are, in this one, 3 whorls. This can be 1 to 3 whorls of branches emanating from this main stalk on the grass. And what's distinctive about these flowers, these spikelets, is that they've got a long awn. So you can see here, there's a long projection off of each of these little spikelets called an awn. And that's pretty distinctive for this species of Chloris. Now, down here you can see the grass in the turf. So it's this tufted grass. It could be clumping, and see how it kind of lays. It'll often send rhizomes, so it can act like a turf, and that's why we see it here growing in this turf, because it can handle being mowed low. It can only get to about 20 inches tall normally anyway, so it's not a very tall grass. The leaf blades are broad, and if you could see the leaf tips, you can see that they are a little bit more rounded than most grasses, and you can see it's kind of tufted habit. Many branches from the base, and the ligule, if I can find one, is of hairs. There's one. You see all of these little hairs on the ligule there. Lots of hairs near the nodes of this grass. Yeah, this is tumble windmill grass, or Chloris verticillata. Here we've got another grass that's, it's common, you'll find it around. It's a little bit taller. This is Bothriocloa lageroides, or silver blue stem. Now the difference between this and the King Ranch blue stem is that the inflorescence is a little bit more contracted, and it's got these really fuzzy awns. You'll see it almost looks like feathers. These are the awns, they're really hairy, and it gives it that silvery appearance. It also has a lighter colored leaf. It's a little bit more green. And rather than silky hairs on the leaves like we saw in King Ranch blue stem, this one doesn't have hairs, and sometimes it might even feel a little sandpapery to the touch. Also, unlike King Ranch blue stem, this grass grows more erect or upright, whereas King Ranch tends to kind of fall. And remember, it has those bendy nodes, but this one has a more straight nodes. So this is silver blue stem, Bothriocloa lageroides. This is a very pokey plant, an angry grass known as Cenchrus spinifex, or sand burr. And you'll notice it has sort of a flattened stem here. That's sort of, the leaves come out in a flattened way. They're keeled, and then these are the fruits. And this is the way that it spreads, is by poking into animals that pass by and dispersing its seed. So yes, Cenchrus spinifex, or sand burr. So here's the find of the day. You'll see around me a beautiful carpet of lovely turf grass. This is buffalo grass, Bouteloua dactyloides. You'll see here little tiny flowers. They look like little bristles. And then these are spikelets like we saw in grama, but they're a little bit shorter and they're not as hairy. These are the male flowers of this grass, of buffalo grass. Male and female flowers are borne on different plants. They're dioecious. So then the female flowers are here. They're a little bit lower in the grass, in the axils. And here we've got a couple of spikelets of the female flowers. Now this grass is a low grass. I think it only gets to maybe, less than a foot tall. And it has both stolons, which are runners above the ground, and rhizomes, which occur below the ground that help it become a nice turf grass. It likes high impact grazing or mowing, which is why it can be so healthy here in this turf. And you'll notice on this stem here, if you can zoom in, there are these teeny tiny hairs on this grass. And this is a great plant that a lot of people like to propagate and cultivate in their yards because of its nice turf-like habit. This is buffalo grass. Well, thank you guys for coming on this little nature walk with us at Lake Arrowhead State Park, and I hope you learned a thing or two about some common grasses in the North Texas area. Hope you have a great day.